Can the President of the United States fall? And will he take his entire Democrat Party down with him? President Biden's approval rating is sinking like a stone, and it's raising all kinds of red flags for Democrats across the board. I'm Harris Faulkner. You are in the Faulkner Focus. The president is no stranger to terrible polling, at least not as of late, but this is a new low even for him. His approval, the worst for a first-term president in the survey's history, going all the way back to Harry S. Truman. Only 36% of voters say the president is doing a good job. That's down by 6 points just since February. And with just a year and a half until the next presidential election, more than half of Democrats say they want what I call ABB, anybody but Biden. Polling now shows the president getting trounced by both former President Donald Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in a head-to-head matchup. Donna Brazile was the chair of the Democrat National Committee when Trump won the White House. She says her party should be worried.
It kept me up, and I thought they should wake up and look at those numbers. It's sobering in a sense, George, that the coalition that elected Joe Biden, with the historic numbers that we saw in 2020, that coalition right now is fragmented. That should concern them.
A new op-ed is asking the tough question. Do Democrats need a Nixon-like intervention with Biden? It reminds us of how Republican leaders convinced Nixon to step aside for the good of the party and the country. Lee Carter, Pollster and Maslansky and Partners president, is with me here. I tell you, that Politico article is something to read about how, they gathered up to convince Nixon. It was an intervention. The Hill, excuse me, not Politico. Yeah. Is that what you see that people are saying needs to happen with the president?
Well, there are some people that are saying that, but some of the recent polls and how far it's dropped is new, and it's new since he's made the announcement, and I think that should be very concerning. Now, there's a few things that I think we need to look at here. Now, number one, his polling is at 36%. This is lower than Donald Trump's polling, and everybody said that was as low as it could. So he's really in a bad position. But here's a couple of things. The number one issue on the voters' minds is the economy. No Democrat is going to be able to address that. That is absolutely off the table. When you look at polling, it says about 15% think that Democrats have the answer. The rest say that it's either Republicans or somebody else that's going to come up with the answer to fix the economy. So no Democrat can step into those shoes. The biggest issue, though, 9 out of 10 Democrats say that abortion is going to be a major factor in their vote. 74% of independents say it's going to be a major factor in their vote. So I think Democrats are going to bet the farm on social issues because they cannot win on economic issues.
Well, and is that what people want to hear, though, at a time when we just saw a Biden idea to make you pay extra if you actually pay your bills on time and have good credit and you try to buy a house? Now there's a penalty for having good credit. I mean, when those are the types of policies coming out.
No, absolutely not. I think that the Democrats are losing on every measure when it comes to the economy. I think whenever you see Joe Biden try to convince Americans that the economy has never been stronger, he's trying to talk about how strong jobs are, how nothing's ever been better, people reject that because their feeling is every month I'm paying more, I feel less good about the economy than I ever have before, and they're just rejecting all of his messages. I think the Republicans have to be very careful now, though. The issue they need to take on right now is the economy. They need to stop, I think, with the woke wars. In many ways, I know those are important to the base, but when you look at what's happened to Ron DeSantis and his poll numbers since he started really leaping forward and focusing more on that than he did on the economy and his Florida blueprint, I think that's sort of telling on what the problem's going to be for Republicans.
All right, let's take a look at the 69% of Americans say they feel that Biden is too old to run for president in 2024. Another 63% say Joe doesn't have the mental sharpness to do it again. They're calling him Joe. Look, age has been something that has been true about him for a while. I mean, he didn't just turn 80.
That's right. I think the biggest thing about Joe Biden is that when he was running in 2020, we didn't see him that much. So we were running off of our memory of him. He ran on decency. He did not run on
excuse me one second. What are people, when you poll them and he says things like, you want to know if age is my, watch me. We do watch him. Exactly, and then the polling shows that it gets worse for him.
And that's why 70% of Americans say that they want somebody else besides Joe Biden to run. The other thing that's a really big problem for Joe Biden is that 45% of people who voted for him last time are less enthusiastic about voting for him this time. Republicans say they're 43% more likely to be enthusiastic this time than they were last time. That's going to have a big impact on turnout.
So you mentioned the word abortion. I won't spend a lot of time on this because I think that if the Democrats don't know how to make that work, that says more about their party than anybody else.
Absolutely.
What do Republicans do with that subject?
So I think one of the most important things that Republicans need to do is they need to bring women into the conversation. Because
the other side isn't doing that at all.
Well, here's the thing. For Democrats, abortion equals women's rights. It's not about the baby, it's about the woman. And when Republicans make the messaging all about the baby and not about supporting the woman who makes the decision, they're actually going to lose ground. I think that the Republicans have a really good opportunity to change the conversation to say, we support women too. We want to give women choice, but we want to make this a choice they rarely have to make. And this is something that they could really do. Right now, the messaging doesn't include women, and that's a loss for the Republicans right now.
That is brilliant. And you see states, some Republican-led states, those governors looking to see where they stand on these issues. You've got like a 12-week moratorium on abortion in some states. What are you finding out from talking with people about those decisions among Republican states?
So when you look at some of those decisions, especially when you look at 6-week rules and those, it's very, very unpopular across the board, even among Republican women. And so the issue really needs to become, where do you draw the line? And I'm not here to tell anybody what the policy should be, because the policy is, this is a really, really personal and emotionally charged issue. But I do know for sure that there are places that we can agree. When we could say when a baby has feelings, for example, nerve endings, those kinds of things, that's when you really see a big change. Now, on the other hand, what you're dealing with on the Democrats is 55% say that they approve of abortion all the way to the last day of pregnancy. 55% of Democrats.
Well, that's just a non-starter for most.
Yeah, absolutely non-starter.
Even among Democrats, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't do what they needed to do when they had bicameral majorities on this issue.
That's
well,
right.
The border is also another example of that. I mean, Democrats they don't agree within their own party.
Yeah, it does seem like first trimester would be something that most people can agree on.
All right, I do want to get this in. New details now are emerging about, well, and we'll get to that in 1 second. Let me go to this. I mentioned the border. An aide to the president tried to wrap up his interview before he could answer a question about his decision to send troops to the southern border. Mediaite with this headline, let her do it. Biden waves off an aide trying to end the MSNBC interview. Takes 4 more questions. The other big hit against this president, and I'm curious if it shows up in polling, is that he just can't rock and roll at the lectern anymore.
Well, there's a lot of concern that he's not addressing the media. People want to hear more from him and less from his press secretary. His press secretary isn't doing him any favors among independent and Republican voters. I think some Democrats are more likely to support. But they do want to hear more from the president. And that is actually going to help people either make a decision for or against him. But a lot of people are concerned about him and saying, if I can't hear from him directly, I'm going to have an issue there.
Well, you know, it's kind of a conflict, though. Because when they do hear from him, he ends up arguing with the reporters and really setting off a situation that the White House then has to clean up. Your last quick thought.
So he ran on unity and decency, and every time he does that, I think he sort of contradicts himself. And when you contradict yourself, that's when you lose trust. He's lost a lot of trust in the American people. He was over 60% trusted when he took office. Now that's he's dropped more than 20% in trust.
And that's across the board.
Across the board.
Whew. A lot to come back from.
Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
A year and a half now doesn't seem that long. Lee Carter, always great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.